This is a May Luna Media production. You're listening to Love, Light, and Black Holes. I'm your host, Morgan Garza, here to remind you of your disco ball soul so you can dance with your darkness. If you're sick of love and light spirituality like I was, you're in the right place. We keep it real, go deep, and give voice to your shadow so your light shines even brighter. Enter the void. Welcome here and welcome back, Shame Slayers and Shadow Sparklers. I am starting this episode with a confession. I have a confession to make. I have committed murder thousands of times, maybe even more than that. And I'm sitting here clutching a knife made of selenite that I use to commit such acts. Okay, so no, this is not a true crime podcast. This is me admitting to killing my old self, to past versions of me, people who I used to be, versions who used to play small and not speak up and be afraid and live in fear and live in shame and live in trauma cycles and pattern cycles and cycles that I need to break. And the only way to break those cycles is to kill off the part of me that is keeping those alive. And that is exactly what this week's episode is going to dive deep on. And this is something that I teach within Way of the Witch inside of Saged, which is now closed for the season, but I teach this every year, and this is something that has become such an integral part of my process and the way that I move through evolution and change and the parts of me that really need to go before I can actually move on and become something bigger and greater and the future self that I love talking about here, because once the old dies, then you're really able to move into the new. But until the old dies, until the old is really pushed out the door, thanked for its lessons, it's going to continue to inform the present, which is not going to create the desired future. But before we get into all of this, y'all know I need to tell you about Nocturne that's starting on October 23rd. If you are listening to this in real time, this is going live on October 15th. That's less than 2 weeks away until Nocturne, my 3-week, 21-day shadow work deep dive starts. And this isn't your grandma's shadow work, you know. We're not going to just focus on the things that you see online and in Instagram and that are everywhere. This is my personal take on shadow work, the way that I do shadow work with myself, the way that I have taught shadow work over the past, 5-6 years, and the way that I have seen really helps people actually get to the place that they want to be rather than continuing to slide back in these familiar but toxic patterns and ways of being. So Nocturne starts on October 23rd. If you are really ready to actually admit that you're sick of your own bullshit, this is for you, because you have to get to that point where you are like, I am so tired of acting like this, of feeling this way, of doing this, of attracting this person, of being broke, of being sick, of not finding love. Like, shadow work is at the core of everything that you want. The health, the wealth, the relationships, the inner peace and outer success, it all comes down to shadow work and the blocks that you have. And so if you are not regularly killing your old self, if you are not regularly doing shadow work and looking at your shit, in Nocturne, we go there. This is for you if you're feeling the shift coming and you want to really shed the old skin. We are at the end of the 9-year in numerology. We are at the end of the snake year in Chinese numerology and Chinese astrology, and we are at the culmination of 2025. And this is really about completion. As I've talked about on this podcast in the previous episodes, especially the one on astrology and the quantum crumble, this is change. And if you are going through a big, massive change in your life right now, it's going to require shadow work, because you are going to have to look at where you're at. You're going to have to look at the past. You're going to have to really understand how you got to where you are and what's going to take you to where you want to be. So if you're after the health, the wealth, the love, and the personal and external everything, it's literally everything, come into Nocturne. The link is down below in the show notes. I would love to have you in here. Come do shadow work with me. I fucking love this shit. This is my jam. This is what I have created an entire ecosystem around, and this is what I have seen make the biggest change in my life. So I hope to see you in there. Let me know if you have questions. Otherwise, let's get into the magic that you came here for, the death of the old self. And we are starting with a quote by Joseph Campbell, who is an incredible author, philosopher, researcher, mystical man studying the myths of society and the hero's journey and so many other things. He says, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." How simple is that, but how also profound. The cave you fear to enter, which is always dark, holds the treasure you seek. What you're looking for is within you. What you seek is already there, but it is hiding in the dark that you are afraid to enter. And this is the season where the veil's thin. October is the beginning of the translation of energy, where we can actually speak beyond the veil, speak beyond the reality that we live in constantly, and access different parts of the psyche and of the world and of dimensions that are already in existence in this plane that we don't usually have this easily of access to. Of course, you can cross beyond the veil anytime you want. This is a phrase normally used in magic and ritual and witchcraft, but this is also reflective of how you can truly go beyond the physical into the metaphysical and pull out this magic that lives in the liminal space between the worlds, between identities, between who you were and who you're becoming. This is when this work is so incredibly powerful, which is why all of what I'm doing is around shadow work right now and focusing on these black holes, because that is where you get your love and light. You cannot only be love and light without acknowledging that you are a black hole and that you have so much in your darkness that is informing your light rather than the other way around. And so killing your old self, the death of the old self, obviously is not about physical death. I am not condoning that you unalive yourself in this physical plane. Let's just get that straight. Disclaimer, please don't do that. That's not what this is about. This is about not an ego death, because I don't believe that that exists, and I'll get into why. But this is about the identity of an old self dying. A soul evolution, a shedding of an old skin, just like how you get rid of clothes that no longer align, no longer fit, no longer represent who you are. This is the exact same thing. And this is how you move into a space where you want to actually be, because you are allowing yourself to let go of the old, to die. But the way that I do this is an actual death ceremony, a ritual. You write an obituary. You move yourself through all of the lessons that you have gained from the old self, because it's not just problems, right? You have profited from who you used to be. Just like when we talk about ancestor work, we don't just talk about how we have all of this inherited generational ancestral trauma. You also have gifts. We love to focus on the negative because that's what our brains are wired to do, but there is so much that you have gained from your old self, and acknowledging that and allowing that to come into the being of who you are creating in your new self is the deepest, dopest shadow work that you can do. And allowing yourself to actually let go and die, this is how you move into and through the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell loves to talk about, that informs so much of what we see in modern media, in movies and stories and shows. This hero's journey of creation and adventure and problem and solving, and then circling all the way back with this new perspective, with this new ability, with new gifts and new ways of looking at the world, and coming into your own hero's journey. Because when you are in this place of evolution, part of you has to go and go through this journey of seeing just what's possible when you allow yourself to go on a little adventure. You can't ascend into where you want to be if you're afraid to die, because rebirth requires burial. And Alan Watts says, just as the flower dies to become fruit, we must die to each moment to be reborn into the next. I guarantee you have died in your old self so many times. and been rebirthed just as many. Because every evolution, every new year, every new big moment in your life requires part of you who didn't believe it was possible, who didn't think it could happen, who was afraid of it happening. Those versions of you have already died. You've already done this 1,000 times. And Baba Ram Dass says the ego dies hard because it knows it will take you with it. And this is where we talk about the ego death. And you hear this so much in plant medicine ceremonies, people who are doing ayahuasca or even psilocybin or peyote or whatever it may be. In the plant medicine community, the ego death is a big topic, and it's something that I naturally, because I'm a contrarian and will always go against the grain, against the flow, and really wonder why people are doing what they're doing and not rush into the mob. This is something that I have always had resistance to because it doesn't really make sense. And understanding psychology in the way that I do, you can't not have an ego. You're always going to have an ego. This is like such a part of your personality and who you are. There's no death of the ego. There's death of an identity around an old self. Yes, for sure, your identity can change however many times you want it to. But the ego is constant. It is just like breathing and your heart beating. As long as you are alive, conscious in this body, you're going to have an ego. Now, you can better manage your ego, you can tame your ego, but your ego is never going to die. So when you hear like, oh, I had an ego death, or come do this thing and experience an ego death, just be careful. Use discernment and make sure that what you're getting into is actually aligned with your goals and what you want to see in the outcome, because your ego is never going to die. So if that's what you're going after, honey, that's not going to happen. So take it with a grain of salt. Use discernment in everything that you do, especially in the spiritual realm, because anyone can say anything. I have this podcast. No one's checking it. No one's saying, hey, Morgan, I reviewed your podcast and these things are not correct. Like, I am allowed, just like everybody else, to come on here, say what I want to say, and move on with my life. And so many people who are in the spiritual industry are in a place of vulnerability and in a place of desperation. I know, I've been there. I have done the exact same thing that so many people do. You seek out people with answers, but you have the answer. Yes, of course, I can be here as a guide and move you through something, but I am never going to be the person that actually gives you what you need. You're going to find that within yourself. I'm just going to turn on a couple lights and maybe hand you a ring of keys and be like, I don't know, one of these is going to unlock that door. Why don't you go try it? So that's also another disclaimer. Your ego never dies. So as we move through this and you're thinking, oh, well, I really wanted an ego death, what you're after is actually a death of identity, a death of self, a death of someone who was anchored into a certain space, place, mentality, mindset, and you now need to reel up that anchor, move your boat, and anchor somewhere else. So that is all that means. So don't go after the ego death speak, because that simply is not a thing. The ego's job is literally survival. It clings to identity like it's oxygen. So even if that identity is miserable, your ego will still attach to that because all it wants to do is survive. And the brain hates this uncertainty so much. The brain does not want to live in uncertainty. And this is from our ancient, not so long ago really, in terms of how quickly our brain has evolved in like the history of the universe. But this is why we want to cling to the negative. This is why we want to always have an attachment to something that is comfortable and familiar. And this is why we will reject uncertainty with everything we know, because we cling to the known self, the familiar suffering, instead of trusting the unknown and the self that's emerging and being like, let's see where this goes. The brain is like, that is not safe. I do not trust it. We don't know where this is going to go. Let's stay here where we know how everything operates. So it can be really difficult with a lot of resistance to kill off the old self. But to be fully alive, fully human, and completely awake is to be continually thrown out of the nest, to be continually put into new situations that you have no idea what you're doing until you go through it and you figure out, and then you know that you can do it, and you don't know until you try. And so in this space of killing off the old self and allowing this old part of you to die, that's the death grip. You've got this death grip on your old self. Your identity is hanging on. Your ego is hanging on to the identity. And there is so much uncertainty that none of you wants to let go. The ego just wants stability, but the soul is wired and built for infinite evolution and expansion. So these two contradictory, contrasting elements of yourself are always going to be at war. So if you are a normal person in 2025, you have likely had a lot of really big change happen this year. We've just gone through eclipse season. All outer planets have now officially changed signs and will be in their new signs for many moons to come. We are at the end of a 9-year cycle in numerology. We are at the end of the snake year in Chinese astrology. There's so much going on this year that I talked about in previous episodes, but there's so much going on that is changing you, likely forever, and in a really good way, but you're also in the in-between. So how do you know when it's time to allow an old self to die? There are many signs and symptoms that could be coming up for you right now that indicate it's time for a self-death. And this could be you feel restless or uninspired or just trapped in the ways of how your life is currently built. What once felt aligned now feels heavy or fake or just like, I literally can't do this anymore. Like it is going to rob me of all my joy if I spend one more minute doing this. Or you're no longer attracted to what used to thrill you. Like sometimes maybe you're just bored and you're like, well, I used to love doing this and now I don't. And I'm craving something else and I don't know exactly what that is, but this ain't it. Old relationships feel energetically mismatched. Sometimes you have been friends with someone for decades and like, are we just being friends because we've been together for so long, we've known each other so well, and we've seen each other through all of these life examples and life evolutions, or are we like really aligned in who we are and like you're actually my person? This is all pointing you to allowing a different part of yourself to go, to just blow off into the wind and alchemize into something else so that you can create more for yourself. Or maybe you're getting a lot of moments where everything is crumbling down. Jobs ending, friendship shifting, identity crises, things that were fundamentally stable are now totally unstable and shifting and changing. And these are rattles of an outdated self. This is the mask that you wear to protect yourself from everything that is out there and to present as someone who is different than what you really want to be. But when that mask falls and you allow yourself to take that first breath, you are killing your old self to make space for your new self, for your rebirth. And I personally have been in a massive, massive killing of the old self this year. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know. If not, I will quickly inform you. I lost my dad in December. This is October. And so it's been just over 9 months. And a whole lot of other things happened in the past 3 years that completely changed who I am. And I will never be the same person. And I will never, there's no like going back, right? There's only moving forward with what happened. And in this space, I have had a massive reckoning with who I am, with what I want, with what I want my career to look like, with what I want my time to look like, with what I want my life and family and living situation to look like. I mean, there was not a stone that went unturned over the past 10 months in my life. Absolutely everything has been questioned and brought to trial, essentially, to gauge its worth in my life. What value does this now have to me? And if it does not present the same value that it used to, then it's got to go. And as hard as these changes may be in the moment, the relief, the release, the permission that comes after is so worth it. And I know it can be really scary to take these things on, but this breakdown, this dismantling of everything is just your rebirth in progress. You're just witnessing it as it's flowing rather than planning it, which, like, how do you plan a rebirth? I don't think anybody can do that. This is really something you just have to take as it comes. And in death and rebirth, you are always going to have this reckoning, this becoming, this release, just like the phoenix burns down to ashes. It burns itself down to ashes and then rises anew from that fertile ground. It doesn't always mean something bad is going to happen when something dies. And I mean, losing my dad was literally my biggest fear. Watching him get sick and die ripped my heart out. And obviously to know that he was in pain and suffering was an immeasurable grief to have currently, to be living through it. And that was my biggest fear, that he was going to die. And I knew it. I knew he was going to die. And then he did. And then I didn't die with him. I wasn't okay at first. I was unwell, obviously. But I also tapped into this well of strength. And I became fearless. And I turned into someone who was just slashing around my life unapologetically. And when I say unapologetic, I don't mean that I was brash and crass and rude and just barreling in. I was sovereign. I was in my dark feminine power because I had tasted, I had touched, I had walked through the darkest, the deepest depths that I had ever known. And I came out shinier, with more light, with more identity in myself and who I am, and with so much less capacity to hold what wasn't aligned anymore. And I have spent the past 10 months getting rid of things that don't serve me, that don't align, that don't fill me with joy, and replacing them with things that do. But also not rushing to replace, allowing what is coming through to truly be chosen. This isn't a knee-jerk reaction to be like, oh God, I've killed off parts of my own self and now I have all this space and it's super uncomfortable and I have no idea what to do with what I've just created. And what have I done? And what have I let go? And oh God, I'm regretting this. Like, moving out of that and into deep and patient trust, and knowing that everything that you bring in its place and what you have removed, everything is going to be so incredibly aligned and authentic into where you are going, because this is exactly how your future self is built, and this is exactly how your past can inform your present and your future rather than impact it with triggers and patterns that live in the shadow. And so you're not losing yourself. You're composting your past into power, and death in any form, physical, emotional, spiritual, is just matter reorganizing itself. Nothing is gone. It's all becoming something new. When my dad left this body and this earth, he became so many things. He became a hummingbird. He became numbers. He became songs. He became sunsets. He became everything instead of this person contained in this sick and dying body. This isn't the end. It's the beginning, and it's the end of another beginning. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. This is my favorite quote of all time from Seneca, because it is constant, because it is always, because it is the only thing that we can rely on in this giant, infinite universe, is that things are going to change. So how do you hold your own funeral? How do you make this happen for yourself? And this self-death as ceremony is truly one of the most powerful things that you can do, because making it ceremony, making it a ritual, allows you to bring sovereignty and respect and reverence for who you used to be. You're not just like, man, I hate that person. I want them out. I don't want to live like this anymore. Goodbye, good riddance, burn them down to the ground. This is coming to your old self with reverence and saying, I love you. Thank you. This is such a beautiful gift that you are giving me to leave, and to leave me with so many lessons that I'm going to take and fertilize my future with. But I don't need you anymore. So thank you for your service. Thank you for all of the versions of me that you helped me become. All of the future me's that I wasn't yet, you allowed me to become, but now I am growing, I am evolving, and you are at the end. And thank you. So write your obituary. Step 1. Here lies the version of me who, and then give examples of that. Overgave, played small, needed validation, said yes when they meant no, settled for crumbs. Write it all out. Write their story. Even the light parts that you love, because that's what you're going to be carrying with you. And all of the things that are what their setbacks were, right? All of the things that you don't want to carry, those are going to be what you are alchemizing in yourself. Write their story and thank them. And then speak the eulogy. Read it aloud. Mourn the comfort from the old identity. Acknowledge the lessons they gave you. Allow yourself to be truly, truly happy that they existed and that they were your life. And then release the remains. Burn the paper, bury it, submerge it in water. You can even tear it into tiny pieces and flush it. I love a flushing ritual. But whatever element feels right, fire, earth, air, water, allow that to be how you alchemize what you have written down about your old self. And you can add a poetic line of ritual. I love doing this in magic. As the smoke rises, so do I. Something that allows you to anchor into the sovereignty and the reverence of what you're doing. And then finally, call in your new self. Write a vow. I now choose to live as, and then describe the person you're coming in great and elaborate detail. Read it aloud under the moonlight, in your bathroom, in your bed, wherever you want to be, but with your hand over your heart. Bring this version into the light, because they are able to exist because the old version of you died. They let go, so you can rise. And then, of course, living beyond this death ceremony, allowing yourself to be anchored so deeply into who you're becoming that you don't have ghosts. You don't get haunted by this self that you have now killed off, and you don't slide back into old familiar patterns. You don't allow yourself to be triggered by the same triggers in the same way. You really, truly, at the core level, make such a beautiful change and shift that all of that doesn't even affect you now, that you are such a different person. You are on a different path, a different timeline, a totally different track, that everything that is familiar and comfortable, now you see robs from you rather than gives to you. And this unknown, this uncertainty, this risk, quite frankly, that you're taking is moving you into who you are becoming. And that uncertainty is excitement, not danger. Because after any death comes the void, the space of in between. And that's where people lose trust. This is the dark night of the soul. And honestly, the soul never has a dark night. It's the ego. The soul is infinite. The soul is infinite light. It does not experience darkness. The ego experiences darkness, cloaks that darkness over the soul, and then the human experiences the dark night of the soul. The soul is infinite light and love. The ego is the black hole. So this is how you can reframe my dark night of the soul is the dark night of the ego. But this necessarily silence of the void of the after death is so vital before a new song begins, before you start hearing those birds chirping in the morning, right? So think about this being rooted in patience and surrender and embodiment. Because the more that you can allow yourself to live in that space, I trust and I release, and I trust and I release, and I trust and I release. And as soon as things come up and they trigger you in the same way, you release them. You say, nope, not now. I recognize that. That is a ghost from my past. Be gone. You can Ghostbusters them. You can sage them. You can smoke them out. You can clap them away. You can ring a bell. You can cut them with the selenite knife, like very similar to what I'm holding. You can reclaim and reframe in real time. And this is when the new self stabilizes. And rest and stillness and creation are so important during this process. And really being easy with yourself, that killing off parts of your identity are not easy, because then your ego grasps for something that isn't fully formed yet and isn't totally stable and rooted. And then you start creating something that is familiar and old, and you may resurrect something that you have killed off. So anchoring in your new self with patience and surrender and embodiment is how you keep from getting haunted by the death of your old self. The void isn't punishment. This in-between is uncomfortable, but that's because you are becoming and you are growing. And remember having growing pains as a kid? They didn't feel good, but that created something so beautiful. And this is so much of what you are going to experience as you do shadow work. As you move through these old parts of you and start looking at who you actually are and what you're actually doing, rather than staying in this same old, in this rut that is easy, but so very wrong. And this is exactly what you're going to experience in Nocturne. So if you are interested in doing shadow work, in getting to the root, in really, truly alchemizing and transcending and transforming from where you don't want to be into where you do, this is what is waiting for you. The link is down below. Come join me for 3 weeks of shadow magic, where you are going to turn all of this into gold. Everything I teach, everything I practice comes back to death as transformation, darkness as alchemy, and shadow as initiation. So come on in. The water's fine. Don't be worried. It's all magic. The version of you you've been clinging to was never the whole story. Let them rest. R.I.P. Thank you. Bless up. You've got living to do, and that living starts now. I'll see you next week. Love, light, and black holes. Thanks for diving into the void with me. If today lit something up in you or cracked something open, follow the show and leave a review so we can magnetize more shame slayers and shadow sparklers into this world. Want more? Step through the portal at lovelightandblackholes.com. That's where the wild magic lives. Until next time, dance with your darkness like it's your favorite song and watch the whole universe light up.